March 19, 1944, 2:17 a.m. Philippine Sea, 140 miles east of Luzon. Commander Tadashi Nakajima stood on the bridge of cargo vessel Akakazi Maru, watching moonlight glitter across calm water. 43 years old. Veteran of the Russo-Japanese War, 26 years at sea. His radar operator had reported nothing. The sea stretched empty in all directions. 6 escort destroyers protected the convoy 18 cargo ships carrying oil, rubber, ammunition. Everything the Southern Army needed. Then, simultaneously, 3 torpedoes struck ships across a 4-mile front, not concentrated on one target, coordinated across impossible distances. Nakajima grabbed the compass, calculated positions. The attacks came from different submarines, he was certain. But how did they coordinate? Japanese doctrine said American submarines operated alone. Lone hunters, independent. His hands trembled as he wrote in a log. Attacked by multiple submarines acting as single unit. Coordination unexplainable. What Nakajima didn't know was that American submarines had been sharing targeting information by radio for 18 months. Not hunting alone. Hunting in wolf packs. And the slaughter had only begun. By March 1945, the Imperial Japanese Navy had lost 1,314 merchant and naval vessels to American submarines. Not through superior torpedo technology, not through better training, through communication. American submarines carried sophisticated radio equipment that allowed real-time coordination across hundreds of miles. Japanese naval doctrine assumed radio silence was sacred, that breaking it meant instant detection and death. They were wrong. This is the story of how American submarine communications systematically destroyed Japan's merchant fleet and starved the empire of resources. How technology defeated doctrine. How wolves hunted together while tigers prowled alone. Every detail comes from declassified U.S. Navy submarine patrol reports archived at the Naval History and Heritage Command. Japanese naval records captured after the war and post-war testimony from commanders on both sides. The communication revolution that Nakajima witnessed at March night would prove more devastating than any weapon. Because you cannot fight what you cannot understand. January 1943, Pearl Harbor Submarine Base. The USS Wahoo prepared for its third war patrol under Lieutenant Commander Dudley Morton. In the radio room, technicians installed new equipment, a high-frequency transmitter capable of sending encrypted messages across thousands of miles. Japanese naval intelligence had studied captured American submarines. They knew about the radios. But they assumed, based on their own doctrine, that submarines would maintain radio silence while on patrol. On January 26th, the Wahoo encountered a Japanese convoy north of New Guinea. Morton didn't attack immediately. Instead, his radioman sent an encrypted message. 4 cargo ships, 2 destroyers, bearing 270 degrees, speed 12 knots. 200 miles away, the USS Nautilus received the transmission. Calculated intercept course. Moved into position. When the convoy emerged from a squall line 4 hours later, both submarines attacked simultaneously from opposite sides. The destroyers couldn't defend against coordinated attacks from multiple directions. 3 cargo ships went down in 17 minutes. The Wahoo's patrol report, archived in Record Group 38, Box 147, described it clinically. Coordinated attack with Nautilus via radio communication. Enemy escorts confused by multiple threat vectors. Achieved total surprise despite daylight surface conditions. In a 1985 interview, Morton's executive officer Richard O'Kane recalled, the Japanese couldn't comprehend what was happening. Their destroyers kept charging toward whichever submarine had just fired, leaving the other side exposed. They were trained for single submarine tactics. We gave them something they'd never prepared for: teamwork. But this was only the first wolf pack. The doctrine was about to evolve. Japanese submarine doctrine, codified in the 1936 Fleet Operations Manual, treated submarines as lone assassins. Radio silence was absolute. Communications meant death direction-finding equipment would triangulate your position within minutes. The Imperial Navy built its submarines for this role. Large, long-range vessels designed for independent patrol. No coordination equipment. Minimal radio capability. Captains operated with complete autonomy once they left port. Vice Admiral Maiwa Shigeyoshi's tactical manual stated, "The submarine is the invisible warrior. Detection means failure. Coordination is impossible without position compromise. Each captain must hunt alone." This wasn't paranoia. It was based on legitimate concerns about direction-finding technology. American submarines carried NURC-3 radio transceivers capable of burst transmission compressed messages, sending fractions of a second, making direction-finding nearly impossible. Encrypted using SIGABA cipher machines that the Japanese never broke. More critically, American submarines had something Japanese doctrine never anticipated: dedicated communication officers. Not radiomen who happened to use the radio. Officers whose entire job was maintaining contact with other boats. The USS Harder's communication log from March 1944 shows 11 separate radio exchanges with other submarines during a single patrol. Position reports, target data, coordinated attack plans, tactical updates, all while remaining undetected. Lieutenant Commander Samuel Dealey's patrol report noted, maintained continuous radio contact with Hake and Hado throughout patrol. Shared targeting data led to 8 confirmed kills. Zero compromise of position. At the submarine school in New London, Connecticut, radio coordination became standard doctrine by mid-1943. Submariners, trained in Wolfpack tactics, how to communicate without compromising position, how to coordinate attacks across distances, how to use radio to multiply effectiveness. The January 1944 training manual devoted 43 pages to radio coordination procedures. Japanese training manuals mentioned radios in a single paragraph. Minimize use. Maintain silence except emergency. Former student officer James Patterson, interviewed in 2010, recalled, "They drilled radio coordination until it was automatic. Call signs, encryption protocols, burst transmission timing. We did more radio training than torpedo training." Looking back, that's what won the war under the sea. The first true American Wolfpack formed in October 1943. Codename, Convoy College. 3 submarines USS Shad, Grayback, and Zero coordinated by Commander Charles Treble from the Shad. The target, Convoy HI-76, carrying aircraft parts and aviation fuel from Shanghai to Truk. October 10, 1943. The Zero spotted the convoy first. Instead of attacking immediately, Lieutenant Commander David White radioed the position to Treble. The Shad and Grayback adjusted course, forming a triangle 30 miles on each side. As the convoy entered the triangle, all 3 submarines surfaced simultaneously at night. Surface attacks from 3 directions. The escort destroyers went to maximum speed, charging toward the Shad's position, the most recent attack. This left the Grayback and Zero completely free. They systematically torpedoed 5 cargo ships while the escorts chased phantoms. Commander Treble's after-action report stated, "Radio coordination allowed us to dictate the terms of engagement. We positioned escorts where we wanted them, attacked where they weren't, and withdrew before they could respond effectively. This is warfare by chess, not chance." The patrol sank 7 ships, 1,314 tons each, with 0 damage to American submarines. Japanese records from Convoy HI-76's escort commander, captured after the war, revealed the confusion. Attacks came from all directions. As soon as we engaged one submarine, another fired from opposite bearing. When we turned to engage the new threat, the first submarine fired again. Coordination seemed impossible at these distances. We suspect multiple submarine groups coincidentally attacked same convoy. No other explanation fits doctrine. They couldn't conceive that 3 submarines were working as a single hunting unit. By March 1944, Wolfpacks expanded to 5 submarines. The mathematics became overwhelming. 5 submarines could cover a patrol area of 40,000 square miles. When one made contact, the others converged. Multiple attack angles. Escorts hopelessly outnumbered. Cargo ships defenseless. The USS Tang, USS Tenosa, USS Seahorse, USS Skate, and USS Spearfish formed Blair's blasters under Commander Edward Swinburne from the Tang. In April 1944, they intercepted convoy Mi-11 carrying rubber and tin from Singapore. The Spearfish made first contact. Radio position, speed, course to the other 4 boats. Over the next 18 hours, the Wolfpack shadowed the convoy, taking turns attacking. When escorts chased one submarine, another attacked. When the escorts reorganized, a 3rd submarine fired. The convoy lost 11 of 14 cargo ships. The escorts sank 0 American submarines. Swinburne's patrol report noted, enemy tactics unchanged from 1942. Rush toward most recent attack. 0 adaptation to coordinated threats. We could predict escort response with 100% accuracy. By June 1944, Japanese Naval Command recognized the pattern. Convoy losses weren't random. They were systematic, coordinated. The Imperial Navy's June 1944 tactical revision included new escort procedures. Assume multiple submarine presence. Maintain defensive posture. Avoid pursuing single contacts. Preserve convoy integrity over aggressive escort action. Better doctrine. But it still assumes submarines couldn't communicate effectively. The Japanese tactical revision treated multiple submarines as coincidental, not coordinated. They were still fighting the wrong war. American submarines didn't just coordinate attacks. They shared everything. When the USS Harder discovered a Japanese destroyer using a new depth charge pattern, the information reached every submarine in the Pacific within 24 hours. When the USS Flasher identified a weakness in escort positioning, Wolfpack commanders adjusted tactics fleet-wide. The Japanese fought each battle independently, learning lessons at terrible cost. Americans fought as a networked force, sharing knowledge instantly. Lieutenant Commander Roy Davenport, captain of the USS Hake, wrote in his April 1944 patrol report, received tactical update from ComSubpac regarding new escort pattern observed by Harder 3 days ago. Adjusted attack approach accordingly. Enemy escort responses exactly as Harder reported. This intelligence network provides decisive advantage. By January 1945, Japan's merchant fleet had collapsed. Of 6 million tons of shipping that existed in December 1941, only 1,500,000 tons remained operational. Submarines had sunk 4,800,000 tons, 80% of losses. The 1,314 ships lost to submarines represented not just tonnage, but Japan's ability to wage war. Oil couldn't reach refineries. Rubber couldn't reach factories. Food couldn't reach cities. Troops couldn't receive supplies. The home islands were starving. Industrial production collapsed to 30% of 1941 levels. The southern resource area, the entire reason for the war, had become inaccessible. American submarine communication had created a blockade more effective than the British strangling of Germany in World War I. Individual American submarine commanders used radios for more than just Wolfpack coordination. They created an informal intelligence network that operated faster than official channels. When the USS Barb's commander, Eugene Fluckey, discovered that Japanese radar could be defeated by approaching at wavetop height during storms, he radioed the information directly to other boats. Within a week, 12 submarines had adapted their tactics. When the USS Archerfish learned that Japanese aircraft carriers were using a specific anchorage in Nagasaki, the information went out immediately. 3 submarines converged. The carrier Shinano, largest warship ever built, sank on her maiden voyage. The radio network turned every submarine into an intelligence collector, feeding real-time data to every other submarine. The collapse wasn't just operational, it was psychological. Japanese merchant captains who survived submarine attacks reported experiences they couldn't explain. Convoys that seemed to sail into ambush designed specifically for them. Attacks that exploited defensive weaknesses the moment escorts revealed them. Submarines that appeared to know exactly where convoys would be hours before they arrived. In a 1954 interview with American historians, former merchant captain Hideyoshi Yamashita recalled, "We called them ghost submarines. They seemed to share one mind. Attack from one direction. Then another appears where no submarine could have traveled so quickly. They anticipated our every move." Some captains believed the Americans had developed telepathy machines. Others thought they had broken our codes. The truth, that they simply talked to each other by radio, seemed too simple to be believed. The Imperial Navy had built its entire submarine doctrine on the assumption that radio communication was suicide. When Americans proved that assumption wrong, Japanese commanders had no framework to understand what they were facing. The final numbers. The 1,314 ships sunk by American submarines included 611 cargo vessels, 5,300,000 tons, 265 tankers, 1,900,000 tons, 174 naval auxiliary ships, 890,000 tons, 201 naval combatants, 540,000 tons, 63 submarines, 190,000 tons. American submarines conducted 1,682 war patrols. They lost 52 boats, a 3.1% loss rate. They sank 30% of Japanese combat vessels and 60% of merchant tonnage. The radio communication system that Japanese doctrine said would lead to instant detection and death had instead created the most effective submarine campaign in naval history. Post-war use strategic bombing survey concluded. The isolation of Japan from her overseas resources was accomplished primarily by submarine warfare. The communication capabilities of American submarines allow coordination on a scale unprecedented in naval warfare. This advantage proved decisive. Historians debate whether radio communication or superior torpedoes determined American submarine success. Dr. Carl Boyd at Old Dominion University argues that the Mark 14 torpedo's eventual reliability was the critical factor. You can coordinate all you want, but without working weapons, coordination is meaningless. However, Admiral Chester Nimitz's post-war analysis states, "Our submarine force's ability to share real-time intelligence and coordinate attacks multiplied effectiveness by a factor of 5. Even with defective torpedoes in 1942, coordinated attacks achieved higher success rates than lone boats with perfect weapons." The relative importance of communication versus weapons technology remains actively debated. What's your perspective? Could American submarines have achieved the same results hunting alone with perfect torpedoes? Or was radio coordination the decisive advantage? Share your thoughts in the comments. What's certain is that the Wolfpacks fundamentally changed submarine warfare forever. May 1945, Tokyo. The Imperial Japanese Navy published its final submarine tactical manual, The section on radio communications had expanded from 1 paragraph to 37 pages. It detailed American Wolfpack tactics, burst transmission procedures, coordination patterns, intelligence sharing networks. Too late. Japan had already lost 90% of its merchant fleet. In September 1945, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force sent officers to study at the U.S. Navy Submarine School in New London, Connecticut. They learned the radio coordination procedures that had destroyed their merchant marine. Former Imperial Navy Commander Zenji Orita attended the first post-war class. His 1976 memoir recorded, "The American instructors showed us their radio procedures, burst transmission, encryption protocols, Wolfpack coordination. We sat in stunned silence. These were the forbidden techniques that our doctrine said would cause instant detection. The Americans had used them successfully for 3 years, while we maintained radio silence and hunted alone. Our doctrine's fundamental assumption that radio meant death had been completely wrong. That era cost us the war at sea." The United States Strategic Bombing Survey's Pacific War Volume concluded, American submarine communication capabilities transformed submarine warfare from individual attacks to coordinated naval operations. This advantage, more than any other factor, determined the outcome of the undersea campaign. By the time Japanese commanders understood what they were facing, Commander Tatsuo Nakajima, the man who couldn't explain coordinated attacks in March 1944, had lost his ship. His command and Japan had lost its lifeline to the resources it needed to continue fighting. The lesson transcends submarines and radio technology. It speaks to the fatal cost of doctrinal rigidity, of assuming your enemy fights by your rules, of treating coordination as impossible because your doctrine says it must be impossible. The Americans didn't have better submarines. They didn't have braver crews. They had radios, and they weren't afraid to use them. Sometimes the most devastating weapon is the one your enemy's doctrine says you cannot possibly possess. And sometimes the difference between victory and defeat is as simple as the willingness to talk to each other.